Warning: the following story contains themes of infidelity, emotional distress, and calculated revenge that may be upsetting for some readers. Discretion is advised. The first clue was a scent that wasn't hers. The second was a text message that glowed with a love that was no longer mine. For 20 years, I gave my wife, Sarah, everything: my sweat, my loyalty, my dreams. I built her a perfect suburban kingdom. But while I was laying the bricks, she was entertaining a new court jester in my castle. My heart didn't just break, it detonated. The rage that followed was cold, quiet, and terrifyingly clear. I could have screamed, I could have shattered our picture-perfect life right then. Instead, I smiled, I planned, and I waited for the perfect holiday to give her a gift she would never, ever forget. You think you know how this story ends? Think again. What I uncovered next changed not just my life, but the lives of everyone who thought they knew us. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever faced a betrayal that cut this deep? What's your ultimate revenge fantasy or your path to healing? Let's share our stories. Part 1: The Ghost in Our Home. The lie began as a whisper, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of our 20-year marriage. It wasn't a sudden storm, but a slow, creeping fog that I couldn't quite see but felt in my bones. I'm Marco, 48 years old, and for 2 decades, my universe revolved around Sarah. I'm the son of Italian immigrants who taught me that family is the only thing that matters, that you build a life with your hands and protect it with your soul. I poured concrete for a living, a job that was hard on the body but honest in its purpose. It paid for our sprawling colonial in a quiet Connecticut suburb, for Sarah's boutique clothing store that was more a hobby than a business, and for our daughter, Emily, to attend her dream college out in California. My hands were calloused and scarred, a roadmap of my devotion. Sarah's were always perfectly manicured. The first sign was perfume, a musky sandalwood scent that was nothing like the light, floral fragrances she'd always worn. It clung to her scarves, her coat, the passenger seat of her Lexus SUV. When I mentioned it, she'd laugh it off. "Oh, probably just a customer at the shop, honey." You know how people love to spray testers. I was a man who trusted his wife, so I accepted it. I wanted to accept it. Then came the late nights. The boutique, which once closed at a sensible 6 o'clock, suddenly required her presence for inventory checks and end-of-quarter accounting that stretched late into the evening. She'd come home flushed and vibrant, her eyes sparkling with an energy I hadn't seen in years, an energy that was no longer directed at me. Our conversations became minefields of vagueness. "How was your day?" I'd ask, and she'd reply with a breezy, "Busy, you know how it is," before burying her face in her phone, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips. That phone. It had become a third person in our marriage, an appendage she guarded with the ferocity of a mother bear. It was angled away from me on the kitchen counter, placed face down on the nightstand, and accompanied her even into the bathroom. The password, once our anniversary, was now a cryptic sequence I didn't know. We used to share everything. Now her digital world was a fortress. The physical distance grew, a chasm opening between our sides of the king-sized bed. My touch, which she once craved, was now met with a flinch or a tired sigh. "I'm just exhausted, Marco," she'd murmur, turning her back to me. The rejection was a slow-acting poison, seeping into my confidence, making me question myself. Was I not enough anymore? Had the years of hard labor weathered me down too much? I looked in the mirror and saw the flecks of gray in my hair, the deeper lines etched around my eyes. I saw a provider, a protector. She looked at me and I suspected, saw a fixture, a reliable piece of furniture that was always there but no longer exciting. Our life had become a stage play where we were both reciting lines from a script we'd long forgotten the meaning of. I'd come home covered in dust and sweat, and she'd be dressed for a gala, heading out for a charity committee dinner or a girls' night out. Her friends, women I'd known for years, seemed to avert their eyes when I saw them, offering pitying smiles. The irony was a punch to the gut. I was building the world she was so desperate to escape. The more I worked to provide for her, the less she seemed to want the man I was. But I was oblivious, or maybe I was willfully blind, because acknowledging the truth meant acknowledging that the foundation I had built my entire life on was nothing but sand. Part 2: The Digital Dagger. The truth, when it came, wasn't delivered in a dramatic confrontation. It arrived silently, on a Tuesday afternoon, through the cold, impersonal glow of an iPad screen. It was our family iPad, the one we used for recipes and streaming movies, synced to Sarah's iCloud account, a digital relic from a time of shared trust. She was out at another one of her inventory nights. I was home alone, nursing a beer and trying to ignore the hollow echo in our oversized house. I picked up the device to look up a recipe for the chicken parmesan my daughter loved, a small act of nostalgia to fill the void. And then I saw it, a string of iMessages glowing green in the notifications. They weren't from any of her friends. The name was simply Mark. The preview text was a dagger. Mark, can't stop thinking about this afternoon. You are intoxicating. My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My hands trembled as I opened the message thread. It wasn't a flicker of suspicion anymore. It was a forest fire, and I was standing in the middle of it. Scrolling up, I fell through a rabbit hole of their affair. Weeks, months of stolen moments, documented in excruciating detail. There were pictures, selfies of them in a car, his arm draped around her face alight with that same vibrant energy she brought home with her. There were hotel room keys held up in victory. There were pictures of my wife, my Sarah, in lingerie I had never seen, in poses she had never offered to me. The messages were a screenplay of our marriage's demise. Her, he's so predictable. He'll be asleep by 10. Him, all the better for us. I've got that bottle of wine you like. Him, did you tell him about the conference in Boston? Her, I told him it was a mandatory buying trip. He didn't even question it. He just wants me to be happy. That line broke something deep inside me. He just wants me to be happy. She had weaponized my love, used my devotion as a cloak for her deceit. I read about their lunches that turned into afternoons in boutique hotels. I read their crude jokes about me, about my schedule, my habits, my ignorance. They called me the workhorse. It was their little pet name for the man funding their trysts. I felt a volcanic rage building, a pressure in my chest so intense I thought I would physically explode. I wanted to smash the iPad against the wall, to shatter our wedding photos, to call her and scream until my voice was raw. But a strange, icy calm washed over me. It was the calm of a man who had already lost everything. The shock had burned away the pain, leaving behind something harder, something colder. It was clarity. I scrolled further, my mind now working like a detective, piecing together the timeline. I cross-referenced dates with her late nights and business trips. It all fit, a perfect, sickening puzzle. The man, Mark, was a real estate developer she'd met through a local business association. His profile picture on a linked social media account showed a man with a smug smile, perfectly coiffed hair, and the soft hands of someone who had never known a day of real labor. He was my opposite in every way. I didn't just read. I documented. With shaking hands, I took screenshots of every single message, every picture, every hotel confirmation she had carelessly left in her email. I saved them to a hidden folder on my personal laptop, then a USB drive. It wasn't a plan yet, just an instinct. The instinct of a man who knew a war was coming and that he needed ammunition. As I sat there in the dark, the only light coming from the screen that held the evidence of my life's great betrayal, I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an archivist of my own destruction. And in that moment, a new thought began to crystallize, sharp and dangerous. Destruction could be a two-way street. Part 3, The Anatomy of a Grudge. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception, only this time I was the one playing a role. I became the perfect husband, a ghost haunting my own life. I'd wake up, kiss Sarah on the cheek as she slept, her face a mask of innocence, and go to work. I'd come home, ask about her day at the boutique, and listen with feigned interest as she spun her web of lies. I was an actor in a tragedy, and only I knew the final act. Inside, I was a civil war. One part of me, the man who had loved her for 20 years, was screaming in agony. I'd look at old photographs of us, young, hopeful, blissfully unaware, and a wave of grief would wash over me, so powerful it buckled my knees. This was the woman who held my hand when my father died, who gave me my daughter, who was the anchor of my world. I'd lie awake at night, feeling the warmth of her body next to me, and be tempted to wake her up, to confront her, to demand to know why. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? The self-doubt was a relentless tormentor. Maybe I was the workhorse. Maybe I had let the spark die, buried it under a mountain of responsibility. But then the other part of me, the colder, harder man born from the glow of that iPad screen, would take over. This man was fueled by a pure, unadulterated rage. He would watch her text, a sly smile on her face, and feel not pain, but a chilling resolve. He saw her not as the woman he loved, but as an adversary. Her every lie was another piece of evidence, every feigned kiss a fresh insult. This Marco didn't want reconciliation, he wanted retribution. The two sides battled constantly. I'd have moments of weakness where I'd think about forgiveness, about therapy, about salvaging the wreckage for our daughter's sake. What if we could fix this? What if this was just a midlife crisis, a desperate cry for attention? I'd even allow myself to imagine a scenario where she confessed, weeping, full of remorse. In these moments, I felt a flicker of the old love, the instinct to protect her, even from herself. But then I'd look at the folder on my USB drive. I'd see the pictures, read the messages. He's so predictable. The words echoed in my mind. She wasn't a lost soul. She was a calculating woman who held me in contempt. She felt entitled to her affair, to her secret life. In one of her texts to Mark, she'd written, "I deserve to feel this way. I've earned it." That was the line that killed any hope of forgiveness. Earned it? Had she earned it by sleeping in the bed I paid for, in the house I maintained, while I was breaking my back to give her a life she clearly felt was beneath her? The arrogance of it was breathtaking. It was the final nail in the coffin of the man who had once loved her unconditionally. This internal conflict gave birth to a plan that was methodical, patient, and theatrical. I realized that a simple confrontation wouldn't suffice. It would be her word against mine, a messy, private affair where she could spin a narrative of a neglectful husband and a moment of weakness. No. The betrayal wasn't private, it was a public humiliation waiting to happen. The punishment, therefore, had to be public, it had to be undeniable, it had to be a spectacle. Christmas was a few weeks away. It was her favorite time of year. She loved playing the grand hostess, filling our home with family, her parents, her sister, my brother, and basking in the glow of the perfect life she projected. It was a performance, and I decided it would be her last. Christmas Eve would be the stage, and I would be the director of a show she never saw coming. Part 4, The Puppet Master's Design. With a stage and a date set, I began to move the pieces into place. My grief and rage coalesced into a laser-like focus. I wasn't just a scorned husband anymore. I was a strategist, an intelligence agent in a war of my own making. Every action had a purpose, every conversation a hidden agenda. My first move was to secure my finances. I met with a bulldog of a divorce attorney, a woman named M.S. Davies whom a trusted contractor had recommended. She was sharp, unsentimental, and had a reputation for eviscerating cheaters in court. I walked into her sterile, high-rise office feeling like a broken man. I walked out feeling like a king with an army. I laid out the evidence, the screenshots, the dates, the hotel receipts I had found by digging through our credit card statements. Her eyes lit up. "Mr. Morty," she said, a thin smile on her lips. "This is what we call a slam dunk. In this state, adultery has a significant impact on alimony, her little hobby boutique. She's about to find out what it's really like to run a business." Following her precise instructions, I began quietly moving assets. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I had half of my paycheck redirected there. I meticulously documented all of her spending, the designer clothes, the spa days, the expensive dinners with the girls that I now knew were with him. I was building a case, brick by brick, just like I had built our house. My second front was the social one. I needed to control the narrative before it even began. Sarah had always painted me to her family as a simple, loving, but ultimately boring man, the reliable provider. I decided to lean into it, but with a twist. I became the most doting husband imaginable. I sent flowers to her shop for no reason. I'd leave little notes on the counter. I made her favorite dinners. On the surface, it was affection. In reality, it was psychological warfare. Every gesture was a reminder of the man she was betraying, a new layer of guilt for her to carry. I wanted her to feel completely secure, completely confident in my ignorance. Her arrogance made it easy. She lapped up the attention, seeing it not as genuine love, but as proof of her control over me. She'd thank me with a kiss that felt as empty as her promises, then retreat to her phone to text him about her clueless husband. I know because I had installed a keylogger on her laptop. It was a gross invasion of privacy, but privacy was a luxury she had forfeited. I watched their conversations in real time now, a silent, all-knowing god of her little adulterous world. The centerpiece of my plan, however, was the gift. I went to a high-end photo printing service. I selected the finest paper, a heavy, glossy stock that felt substantial in your hands, and I printed every piece of evidence. The smiling selfies with Mark, the close-up of a hotel room key. The most damning text messages, laid out like poetic verses. I arranged them chronologically, telling the story of her affair from its first flirtatious message to their plans for a post-Christmas getaway in Vermont. I bought a beautiful, leather-bound photo album, the kind you use for a wedding or a baby's first year. On the cover, in elegant gold lettering, I had it embossed, the story of us, the real story. Inside, I placed each photo, each screenshot with artistic care. The first page was a beautiful picture of Sarah and me from our wedding day, 20 years ago. The caption below read, "The beginning." The following pages were the slow, brutal descent. I even included a photo of Mark and his own wife and children, which I found on his public social media profile. A little bonus. The final piece was the divorce papers. MS Davies had them drawn up, ironclad and merciless. They cited her adultery in unflinching detail and laid out a division of assets that would leave her with her unprofitable boutique and little else. I wrapped the legal documents in festive, cheerful paper with a big, red bow. My preparations were complete. I had the financial leverage, the irrefutable evidence, and the perfect stage. As I watched Sarah direct the placement of Christmas decorations around our home, humming carols while simultaneously texting her lover about their upcoming ski trip, I felt no anger, no pain. Just the cold, quiet hum of a machine about to be switched on. Part 5, The Last Supper. Christmas Eve arrived cloaked in a pristine blanket of snow. The world outside was silent and peaceful, a stark contrast to the tempest brewing within the walls of my home. The house smelled of pine from the towering tree in the living room and the roasting garlic and rosemary from the leg of lamb I was preparing. It was a scene of domestic bliss, a perfect holiday postcard, and it was all a lie. Our guests began to arrive around 6. Sarah's parents, Bill and Carol, were first, bearing gifts and festive platitudes. Bill was a quiet man who had always felt a silent kinship with. Carol was the source of Sarah's social ambition and entitlement. Then came Sarah's younger sister, Chloe, with her husband and 2 boisterous kids. Finally, my brother Leo arrived, a bear of a man with a booming laugh that usually filled the house with warmth. Tonight, it just felt like noise. Sarah was in her element, the queen of the castle. She floated through the rooms in a new cashmere dress, a purchase I knew coincided with a hotel stay 2 towns over, laughing, pouring expensive wine, ensuring everyone was comfortable. She was radiant. She was a fraud. At one point, she pulled me into the pantry, her eyes sparkling. "Everything is perfect, Marco, just perfect." She kissed me, a quick performative peck, before her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and that secret smile I'd come to despise flickered across her lips. A Christmas Eve message from Mark, no doubt. "I just have to reply to this, it's for the shop," she whispered, turning away. I just smiled. "Of course, honey, take your time." We sat down for dinner at the grand mahogany table she had insisted on buying years ago. It was laden with food, a feast fit for a king and his court of jesters. I watched as Sarah regaled everyone with stories about the boutique's holiday rush, painting a picture of herself as a savvy, hardworking entrepreneur. Her parents beamed with pride. My brother looked at me and winked, a gesture that used to mean "you lucky bastard," but now felt like a jab. I played my part. I carved the lamb. I poured the wine. I laughed at the jokes. I was a passenger in my own body, watching the scene unfold from a great distance. I saw the 20 years of shared holidays, the ghosts of Christmases past, flickering at the edge of my vision. I felt a pang of sorrow, not for the woman sitting across from me, but for the man I used to be, the man who believed in all of this. After dinner, we moved to the living room to open gifts. The floor around the tree was a mountain of brightly wrapped packages. The children tore into theirs with gleeful shrieks. The adults exchanged pleasantries and polite thank yous for sweaters and bottles of scotch. I waited patiently. My gifts for Sarah were the last ones left under the tree. "Oh, Marco, you always save the best for last," Carol, her mother, cooed. Sarah smiled, a picture of wifely devotion. "He spoils me." I reached under the tree and pulled out the two gifts. The first was the large, flat box wrapped in cheerful snowman paper. The second was the smaller, thicker one, wrapped in elegant gold. I handed them both to her. "There are two," she said, feigning surprise. "One is for the woman I married," I said, my voice steady, my eyes locked on hers. "And the other is for the woman you've become." A flicker of confusion crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by excitement. She opened the smaller, gold-wrapped gift first. Her manicured fingers tore away the paper to reveal the leather-bound photo album. "Oh, Marco, it's beautiful," she breathed, tracing the gold lettering on the cover. "The story of us, the real story." She looked at me, a genuine, warm smile on her face. "That's so sweet." The room was quiet, everyone watching her, expecting a sentimental journey through our life together. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy drumbeat. This was it, the precipice. She opened the cover. Part 6, the unwrapping. The silence in the room became a living entity. It pressed in from all sides, heavy and suffocating. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the faint, tinny sound of Christmas carols playing from a speaker in the kitchen. Sarah's smile froze on her face as she looked at the first page, our wedding photo. For a fleeting second, relief washed over her features. Then she turned the page, her breath hitched. A small, choked sound escaped her lips. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of horror. On the page was a crystal-clear screenshot of a text message. "Mark, can't stop thinking about this afternoon. You are intoxicating." Beside it was their first selfie together in his car, her head resting on his shoulder. She frantically flipped to the next page and the next. Each turn revealed a new scene from her secret life. The picture of the hotel room key. The texts where they mocked me, the lingerie photos, the plans for their Vermont trip. Her hands began to shake so violently that the heavy pages rattled. Her mother, Carol, leaned forward. "What is it, dear? What did he get you?" Without a word, Sarah's hand went limp and the album slid from her lap, falling open on the floor for everyone to see. It landed on the page with Mark's family photo. A collective gasp went through the room. Chloe, her sister, covered her mouth. Her father, Bill, stared, his face a thundercloud of disbelief and shame. My brother Leo looked from the album to me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes locking with mine. They were wild with panic and rage. "What is this? What have you done?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. I remained seated in my armchair, calm, my hands resting on the armrests. "I believe the cover says it all, Sarah. It's the real story of us." "How could you?" she shrieked, her voice breaking, the facade of the perfect hostess shattering into a million pieces. "You do this in front of my family on Christmas Eve." "I thought it was fitting," I replied, my voice dangerously soft. "You've been putting on a performance for them, for everyone, for months. I just thought I'd direct the final scene. It's a tragedy." Her father, Bill, a man I'd respected for 20 years, finally found his voice. He stood up, his face ashen. He looked not at his daughter, but at me. "Marco, I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say, Bill," I said, my voice hardening. "It's all in the book." Sarah scrambled to her feet. "He's twisting things, it's not what it looks like. He's been distant, he's been cold." She stammered, desperately trying to weave a new narrative. I just laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. "Distant? No, Sarah, I've been observant. And I have one more gift for you." I reached for the last present, the one wrapped in snowman paper. I picked it up and held it out to her. Her hands wouldn't take it, so I simply let it drop into her lap. "Merry Christmas, Sarah." With trembling fingers, she tore off the paper. She didn't need to read past the first page to know what it was. The bold, official font of the legal documents was unmistakable. Petition for dissolution of marriage. She looked from the papers to my face, her eyes finally filling with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of pure, unadulterated fury. She had been outplayed. She had been exposed. The queen had been dethroned in front of her entire court. "You bastard," she whispered, the words dripping with hate. "You will regret this." I stood up and for the first time that night addressed the entire room. "I think it's time for everyone to leave. The party's over." Part 7, A New Foundation. The aftermath was a hurricane of emotion. Sarah's family, caught between loyalty and shame, scurried out with mumbled apologies and averted eyes, dragging their bewildered children with them. My brother, Leo, was the last to leave. He walked over, put a heavy hand on my shoulder, and looked at the devastation around the room, the discarded wrapping paper, the damning photo album still lying open on the floor, and Sarah, who had collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing with rage. "I'm with you, bro," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Whatever you need." It was all he had to say. It was everything I needed to hear. That night, for the first time in months, I slept. It wasn't a peaceful sleep, but it was a deep, dreamless void, the sleep of a man who had finally lanced a festering wound. The next morning, Christmas Day, the house was eerily silent. Sarah was gone. Her car was missing, and a few of her closets were hastily emptied. She hadn't even put up a fight. The evidence was too absolute, the humiliation too complete. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings and painful conversations. The divorce was as brutal and swift as my attorney had promised. The photo album became Exhibit A. Sarah's affair and her blatant use of marital funds to support it left her with no leverage. She fought, of course, through her lawyers, claiming emotional distress and trying to paint me as a cruel, vindictive monster. But the facts were the facts. In the end, she got her boutique, now her sole source of income, her car, and a fraction of the assets she had expected. I got the house. I got my self-respect back. The most difficult conversation was with my daughter, Emily. I flew out to California and sat with her for hours, explaining everything. I didn't show her the album. She didn't need to see those images of her mother, but I told her the truth, gently but firmly. She cried for the family she thought she had, for the image of her parents that was now shattered. But she was a smart, compassionate young woman. She was angry with her mother, but she was also deeply hurt for me. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said, her voice small. "I'm so sorry she did that to you." In that moment, I knew our bond was unbreakable. Life found a new rhythm. The big, empty house was quiet at first, but slowly I began to fill it with my own life. I reclaimed the space. I took up woodworking, a hobby I'd always wanted to try, and the scent of sawdust replaced the ghost of her perfume. I started having my brother and some old friends over for poker nights. I reconnected with the man I was before he became just Sarah's husband. I did have a few moments of reflection, wondering if there was a different path I could have taken. Could I have confronted her privately? Could we have gone to counseling? Perhaps, but when I thought of her words, "He's so predictable, I've earned it," I knew I had made the right choice. Her betrayal wasn't a mistake, it was a choice, a reflection of her character. My response had to be equally deliberate. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about refusing to let her control the narrative of my life's end. It was about taking back my own story. Several months later, I heard through the grapevine that Mark had gone back to his wife, claiming to have been seduced and manipulated by a desperate and unstable woman. Sarah had lost not only her husband and her comfortable life, but her lover as well. She was forced to sell her Lexus and was apparently struggling to keep the boutique afloat. I felt a brief, grim satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Her fate was no longer my concern. My healing wasn't a straight line, but it was steady. It came in quiet moments, a beautiful sunrise on my morning run, a phone call from my daughter just to chat, the satisfaction of a perfectly crafted dovetail joint on a new bookshelf. I was building again, not a house for someone else, but a life for myself. The foundation wasn't concrete this time, it was resilience. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that it was strong enough to hold whatever came next. If this story hit home for you, or if you just love a good tale of love, betrayal, and ultimate justice, make sure to like and subscribe for more sagas from the heart. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Was my response justified, or should I have taken a different path? Forgive or revenge? Tag a friend who you think would have a strong opinion on this. Check out my next post for another twisty ta. And if there was a moment in this story that really got to you, clip it and share it. Let's keep the conversation going.